What's a sheltered workshop?
Oh, how many? Really?
The notification lights up a phone screen at 6:47 in the morning, and within hours 3 million people believe something that never happened. The claim spreads fast. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, has somehow become owner of a hidden estate once tied to Diana, Princess of Wales. The story says Queen Camilla's family is furious. It says doors slammed behind palace walls. It says a quiet war just turned loud. None of it is confirmed, and yet the screenshots keep multiplying. Watch how the numbers climb. A single post becomes 1,000 shares. 1,000 becomes 100,000. By nightfall, the words, Diana's secret estate, sit at the top of the trending lists. And somewhere in the noise, the actual truth gets buried under emotion no algorithm can measure. Here is the strange part. Almost nobody asks the simplest question. Where, exactly, is this estate? Who signed what? What document? What date? What law? The story travels faster than any answer ever could, because people do not share facts. They share feelings. Hi viewers, before we go any further, tell me honestly in the comments, do you still think about Princess Diana even now, all these years later? Because that question matters more than it looks. Diana, Princess of Wales, died in August of 1997, and yet her name still moves markets of attention, like few living people can. She has become something larger than a person. She is memory itself, stitched into the public imagination, attached to places she may have never legally owned, and properties she never once set foot inside. That is how rumours like this one are built. Not from lies exactly, but from longing. People want Diana's story to continue. They want her to still have a stake, a piece of land, a corner of the kingdom that belongs to her even in death. So when a headline suggests an estate linked to Diana has changed hands, the public does not check the deed. They feel the loss all over again, and feelings do not need evidence. They only need a target. The target this time is structure, the cold, quiet machinery of royal inheritance, the kind of system most people never see and almost no one understands. Estates in Britain do not pass the way emotion expects them to. They move through trusts, through centuries-old charters, through legal lines drawn long before anyone alive today was born. A burial site is not an inheritance. A memory is not a deed. A famous name attached to a place does not make that place anyone's property. But try telling that to 3 million people at 6:47 in the morning. The royal family says nothing. It rarely does. And in that silence, the story grows teeth. Princess Anne becomes a villain or a hero, depending on who is sharing. Camilla's relatives become the wounded party. Diana becomes the ghost at the centre of it all, pulled back into a fight she never started and could never have known about. Strip away the noise, though, and a different shape appears underneath. A story not about secret ownership, but about how a nation grieves a woman it lost almost 30 years ago. A story about the difference between what we feel we own and what the law says we actually do. Because once you separate emotion from ownership, the entire story changes. Stand at the edge of a small lake in the English countryside, and you will understand why millions believe a lie. The water is still. An island sits at its centre, ringed by trees, unreachable by the public. This is the Oval, on the grounds of Althorpe House in Northamptonshire, and beneath the soil of that island lies Diana, Princess of Wales, buried there in September of 1997 by her own family, away from royal ground, away from the institution she had left behind. Visitors come every summer. They stand at the fence, they look across the water and feel something they cannot quite name. And in that moment, a quiet assumption forms in the mind of nearly everyone who stands there. This place is hers. This land belonged to Diana. It did not. Althorpe is a Spencer estate, and it has been for roughly 5 centuries. The Spencer family has held this ground since the 1500s, passing it down through a line that has nothing to do with the crown. Diana was born a Spencer. She grew up running these halls as a child, long before any royal wedding, long before the cameras, long before the title Princess of Wales was ever placed on her shoulders. Here is the detail that breaks the rumour in half. When Diana married into the royal family in 1981, she did not bring Althorp with her, and the royal family did not absorb it. The estate stayed exactly where it had always been, inside the Spencer bloodline. Today it belongs to her brother, Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, who inherited it when their father died in 1992. So the land that feels most like Diana's estate is the one place the royals were never going to touch. Think about what that means for the viral claim. The story says Princess Anne took ownership of a Diana-linked property. But the most Diana-linked property in all of Britain is privately held by the Spencer family, governed by inheritance law that predates the current monarchy's grip on these systems by centuries. Anne could not take it. Camilla's family could not lose it. It was never on the table. And yet the feeling persists, because grief does not read property records. Diana was a daughter here before she was ever a princess. She played on these grounds as a girl. She is buried on them as a legend. To the public, that closeness looks like ownership. To the law, it looks like nothing of the kind. A burial place is a resting place. It is not a transfer of title, not a deed, not an estate changing hands. This is the gap where the rumour lives, the space between what the heart insists and what the paperwork proves. The public sees an island, a grave, a famous woman, and a powerful family, and assembles a story out of the pieces. The law sees a 500-year-old Spencer holding that the royals were never part of. But the public memory of Diana did not stay inside Althorp's gates. It takes about 4 seconds for a brain to turn a coincidence into a conspiracy. Watch it happen in real time. Someone reads that Diana is buried on private land. Someone else reads that Princess Anne owns a country estate. A third person sees a headline about Camilla's family and royal contracts. 3 separate facts, 3 separate corners of reality. And then a single mind stitches them together into one explosive story that none of them, alone, could ever support. This is how royal misinformation is built. Not with one big lie, but with 3 small truths shoved into the same sentence. The names blur first. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal. Queen Camilla. Prince William, now Duke of Cornwall. Diana, gone since 1997. In careful reporting, these are distinct people with distinct roles and distinct legal standings. In a viral post, they become one swirling cast in a single drama. Their timelines collapsed, their roles swapped, their relationships rewritten to fit whatever headline performs best. Then comes the emotional shortcut. The human mind hates loose ends. It wants stories to close, to resolve, to make sense. So when it sees scattered royal facts floating without connection, it does the thing it does best. It invents the connection. It fills the silence with a plot. And royal silence is everywhere. The palace rarely confirms, rarely denies, rarely explains. That quiet is not an accident. It is centuries-old policy, the institution's oldest defence. But to a public hungry for answers, silence reads like a confession. If they are not denying it, people reason, then something must be there. Something usually is not. Consider how the word estate itself plays tricks. To most people, an estate means a house, a mansion, a place you can point to on a map. But in royal terms, an estate can mean a sprawling financial system, land, contracts, businesses, leases, trusts, stretched across counties and governed by charters older than the United States. When a headline says an estate changed hands, the public pictures a single mansion with a key. The reality is a legal machine with thousands of moving parts. That mismatch is where symbolism quietly swallows fact. People confuse the symbol of a place with the legal ownership of it. They confuse a famous name attached to a property with a claim on that property. They confuse a routine administrative shift inside an institution with a personal war between famous women. No accusations here, just the simple, almost mechanical way a misunderstanding grows teeth and starts to walk on its own. And here is the uncomfortable part.
Very eloquently and visually sold both themselves and their topics so accurately, and I hope I don't need to encourage you to support further.
The people sharing these stories are not stupid. They are grieving or fascinated or both. They love Diana, or they love the spectacle, and that love makes them generous with belief. The rumour does not survive because people are foolish. It survives because they care. But every one of these tangled royal stories keeps circling back to one structure in particular. One centuries-old machine where real change actually did happen, where contracts really were reviewed, where one name really did quietly disappear from the books, and one estate sits at the centre of almost every misunderstanding. In September of 2022, billions of dollars in assets change owners in a single silent instant, and no money ever moves. There is no auction, no signature in a boardroom, no press conference announcing the deal. Queen Elizabeth II dies on the 8th of that month, and in the same breath that makes Charles a king, it makes his eldest son the master of one of the oldest private fortunes in Britain. The machine is called the Duchy of Cornwall, and it was created in 1337, almost 700 years ago, by Edward III, built for a single specific purpose: to fund the heir to the British throne. Not the monarch, the heir, the next in line. For nearly 7 centuries, this estate has existed to pay for the future king before he ever wears the crown. For decades, that heir was Charles. As Prince of Wales, he ran the duchy like a serious enterprise. Farmland, property, organic food brands, holiday rentals, commercial leases. By the time he became king, the Duchy of Cornwall held land valued at well over $1 billion, spread across more than 20 counties in England. Its most famous face was Highgrove House, a country home whose gardens became almost inseparable from Charles's public image. Then the Queen died, and the entire structure passed in an instant to Prince William, the new Duke of Cornwall. Understand what that means, because the public almost never does. This was not a ceremonial title handed over with a smile. This was financial and administrative command of an estate worth more than $1 billion, complete with tenants, contracts, employees, and partnerships that had been built and shaped over decades under the previous Duke. And here is the detail that matters for everything that follows. The Duchy of Cornwall does not operate like the public side of the monarchy. It runs like a private estate business. That means it has vendors, it has consultants, it has long-term arrangements with designers, builders, and advisors. And when leadership changes, every single one of those arrangements can be reviewed, renewed, or quietly ended under the new Duke. A new owner does not have to keep the old owner's people. That is not cruelty. That is how private estates have always worked. So picture the scene that nobody filmed. A young man inherits a 700-year-old fortune overnight. Around him sits a web of contracts signed under his father's name. Arrangements made for his father's tastes, his father's projects, his father's chosen circle. The new Duke now holds the power to keep them or let them go. And every choice he makes sends a signal far louder than any statement. This is the part the rumours never explain properly. The duchy is not just property. It is inheritance power itself. The legal right to fund, to hire, to build, and to decide who stays close to the throne's money and who does not. One duke builds a system over a lifetime. The next inherits it in a single afternoon, and the next quietly begins to reshape it in his own image. The transfer was calm, dignified, utterly silent. But every time the duchy changes hands, something always gets quietly reviewed. The phone call that does not get returned says more than any letter ever could. Somewhere inside the restructuring of the Duchy of Cornwall, a name that had appeared on its projects for years simply stops appearing. No announcement, no explanation, no public farewell. The name is Annabel Elliot, and she is not a stranger to this family. She is the younger sister of Queen Camilla. For years, during Charles's time running the duchy, Annabel Elliot worked as an interior designer on duchy properties. According to multiple reports in the British press, her work touched holiday rentals and estate interiors, connected to the duchy's commercial side, the same enterprise Charles had built into a serious business. She was, in the simplest terms, part of the trusted circle, a family connection woven into the estate's daily operations. Then William took over, and according to those same reports, Annabel Elliot was not reappointed for continued duchy interior design work. Read that carefully, because this is exactly where rumour and fact split apart. There was no announced feud, no leaked argument, no statement from either side calling it a fight. What there was instead was an absence, a name that used to be on the contracts, and then was not. Royal commentators described it as a quiet reset of duchy operations under its new duke. From a public relations standpoint, the move suggested a younger heir clearing space to run the estate his own way, with his own people, on his own terms. That is a normal thing for a new owner to do. Businesses do it every single day, all over the world, without anyone calling it a war. But this was not just any business. This involved the sister of the Queen. And that single fact is what transforms an ordinary administrative decision into something the public can feel in its chest. Because when the person quietly stepping back is family, when she shares a bloodline with Camilla, Queen of the United Kingdom, the silence stops looking like paperwork and starts looking like a message. Royal biographers have long debated whether moments like these carry hidden meaning or none at all. Was it personal? Was it simply practical? Was William drawing a line or just managing an estate? No confirmed answer exists, because no one inside that circle has ever stated one plainly. The palace, as always, says nothing, and that is the heart of it. In ordinary families, a change like this comes with a conversation, an explanation, a reason spoken out loud. In royal systems, the explanation almost never comes. The decision is made, the contract ends, the name disappears from the file, and everyone outside is left to guess what it meant, or whether it meant anything at all. That guessing is where the Camilla connection rumours were born. Not from a confrontation anyone witnessed, but from a vacancy nobody explained, a loss of influence with no scene attached, a quiet shift in a centuries-old machine that touched a name the public happened to recognise. The truth here is not a screaming argument behind a palace door. It is something colder and stranger, a contract not renewed, a sister not reappointed, a silence allowed to stretch on until the public filled it with a story of its own. And in royal systems, silence often replaces explanation. 3 estates sit on a map of England, and the public has glued them all into one imaginary kingdom that does not exist. Look at them clearly, one at a time, because this is where the whole rumour finally comes apart. The first is Gatcombe Park in Gloucestershire, the private country home of Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, purchased for her family back in 1976. The second is Highgrove House, the celebrated garden estate that sits inside the Duchy of Cornwall, the property tied to Charles and now to the Duchy's new leadership. The third is Althorpe, the 500-year-old Spencer estate where Diana lies buried. 3 houses, 3 completely separate legal worlds. And in the viral story, they melt into a single fantasy where Anne somehow inherits a Diana property and Camilla's family rages over the loss. It does not work. It cannot work. The law keeps them apart with walls older than most nations. So why does the public keep building this hidden estate that no record has ever shown? Royal biographers have long debated this exact question, and the answer lives less in property law than in human longing. Diana, Princess of Wales, became a global symbol the moment she died. Not just a woman, but a feeling shared by millions who never met her. And feelings demand a place to live. People want her memory to own something, to hold ground, to keep a permanent address in the kingdom that in their minds treated her unfairly. That hunger collides with a second belief, one that has followed the royal family for generations. The public has always suspected the crown hides assets, secret wealth, quiet properties, fortunes tucked away from view. Sometimes that suspicion has real history behind it, but suspicion is not proof, and a hunch is not a deed. Now stack those 2 beliefs on top of each other. A beloved woman who should own something, a royal institution that must be hiding something. Put them together, and the human mind does the rest. It invents a secret Diana estate, hands it to a royal, and writes a family war around it, all without a single document to support one word. Here is the simple truth the rumour cannot survive. There is no verified record of any secret Diana estate transfer to Princess Anne. No deed, no statute, no filing. Gatcombe is Anne's private home. Highgrove belongs to the duchy system. Althorpe belongs to the Spencers. None of them is a hidden inheritance, and none of them changed hands the way the story claims.
We're just spending £1 million on doing a swimming which was supposed to have a life of 25 years.
Confusion is not stupidity. It is the natural result of grief meeting suspicion in a public that still aches for a woman gone almost 30 years. But one estate carries more emotional weight than all the others combined. Stand again at that lake in Northamptonshire and watch a stranger weep for a woman she never met. It happens every year. People travel from across the world to stand at the edge of the Oval at Althorpe, looking toward the island where Diana, Princess of Wales, was laid to rest in 1997. They leave flowers they cannot place. They whisper to a grave they cannot reach. And in that moment, something powerful and quietly false takes hold of them. The certainty that this woman, and everything connected to her, somehow belongs to them too. That feeling is the engine behind every rumour in this story. It is why the lie about a secret estate spread to millions in a single morning. Diana belongs to the public imagination in a way almost no figure in modern history ever has. She was the people's princess, the woman who hugged the sick when others would not, who walked through hospital wards and minefields, who turned her own pain into a kind of public language. When she died, the grief was not private, it was global, and global grief does not fade neatly. It looks for somewhere to land. So the public began doing something it never quite noticed. It started using the language of ownership for a woman who owned almost nothing in the royal sense. People say Diana's palace, Diana's estate, Diana's legacy, Diana's property. Words that sound like deeds but carry only emotion. Royal biographers have long debated whether this emotional ownership has actually grown stronger over time, not weaker, as new generations meet Diana through documentaries and headlines rather than memory. And media narratives feed it. From a public relations standpoint, the word ownership sells far better than burial. A story that says Diana owns a hidden estate travels. A story that says Diana is simply buried on her family's private land does not. So the louder, looser word wins, and the public learns to think of a grave as a holding, a memory as a title, a resting place as real estate. This is the gap nobody likes to look at directly. Burial is not inheritance. A famous woman lying beneath the soil of her childhood home does not own that home, and her children do not inherit it through her. Emotional ownership and legal ownership are two different worlds, and Diana lives in only one of them now. The one inside the public's chest, not the one written in any property registry. That distinction sounds cold. It feels almost cruel, but it is the exact line where every royal rumour is either born or buried, and that confusion becomes most powerful when inheritance enters the story. A child of Princess Diana cannot inherit the one place most associated with his own mother, and almost no one knows why. Sit with that fact because it overturns everything the rumour assumes. Prince William, Prince of Wales, and Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, are Diana's sons. If grief were law, Althorpe would pass to them. The public would expect it. The emotion demands it. And yet, under the actual rules that govern that estate, neither of Diana's children stands in line to inherit it at all. The reason is a system most people have never heard of, working silently behind the headlines. Althorpe follows the Spencer line, not the royal one. When the 8th Earl Spencer died in 1992, the estate passed not to Diana, who was alive then, married into the royal family, but to her brother, Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl. That is how this kind of inheritance works. It moves through the title, through the earldom, down the male Spencer line that has held the land for roughly 5 centuries. Diana's marriage into the crown placed her outside that line. Her sons, raised as royals, were never inside it either. So the most Diana place in all of Britain is destined to pass to Spencer heirs, not to the princes the public sees as her living legacy. Now set that beside the royal side, which runs on a completely different track. The Duchy of Cornwall, created in 1337, passes automatically to the heir to the throne. That is why it moved to Prince William the instant Charles became king, with no will, no choice, no money-changing hands. Above all of it sits the Crown estate, a vast holding worth many billions, that the monarch does not personally own at all, but holds on behalf of the nation, its profits handed to the government every year. 3 systems: the Spencer earldom, the duchy, the crown estate, each with its own ancient rules, none of them speaking to the others, none of them able to hand a secret Diana estate to Princess Anne. This is the quiet heartbreak buried under the noise. Diana's legacy does not sit in one place that anyone can inherit. It is scattered across systems that were never designed to hold a memory, divided between a family she was born into, an institution she married into, and a public that claimed her after she was gone. The law gave her sons titles and duties, but not the one piece of ground the world ties most tightly to her name. Legacy, it turns out, is harder to inherit than land. But one moment in recent years reignited all of this confusion. The moment a young duke quietly reorganized a 700-year-old empire, the press reached for a single word, and that word was never administration. It was tension, it was snub, it was feud, and almost none of it matched what actually happened inside the walls of the Duchy of Cornwall. Rewind to the handover. Prince William becomes Duke of Cornwall in September 2022, inheriting an estate valued at well over $1 billion, with land stretched across more than 20 English counties. And like any new head of a vast private enterprise, he begins to make decisions. Contracts come up for review. Long-standing arrangements are weighed. Some partnerships continue, others quietly end. This is the ordinary work of running an estate that funds the future king. But the public does not see ordinary. The public sees a story. When reports surfaced that Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister, was not reappointed for duchy interior design work, the press did not file it under routine restructuring. It filed it under family drama. Royal commentators turned a contracting decision into a chess move. From a public relations standpoint, the move suggested a generational changing of the guard, a young duke putting his own stamp on his father's empire. But suggestion is not the same as conflict, and a new direction is not the same as a fight. This is where truth and interpretation begin to split apart completely. Royal biographers have long debated whether William's early duchy decisions carried any personal message at all, or whether the public simply needed them to. Because the institution stayed silent, as it always does, and silence is the one thing the modern internet refuses to tolerate. Where the palace offers nothing, the public manufactures everything. So a calm transition became a war. A non-renewed contract became a banished sister. A young man managing an inheritance became a villain in someone else's story. And the actual events, administrative, lawful, almost boring, vanished beneath a narrative far more exciting than the facts could ever support. The real story was never personal rivalry, it was generational control. One duke builds a system across a lifetime, the next inherits it overnight and reshapes it in his own image. That is not betrayal. That is how a 700-year-old institution survives, by passing power down and letting each holder remake it. But the public did not want survival. It wanted a scandal, and it built one out of silence. And that is where truth and interpretation begin to split apart completely. There is no secret estate. There never was. And that, in the end, is the most haunting part of the whole story. No hidden Diana property passed to Princess Anne. No deed, no statute, no offshore trust quietly moved a famous woman's land into royal hands. Queen Camilla's family was not robbed of an inheritance, because no such inheritance existed. The viral claim that reached millions in a single morning was built on nothing more than feeling, suspicion, and the silence of an institution that has never explained itself to anyone. Strip it all down, and what remains is not a crime. It is a misunderstanding, a vast, collective one, about how royal property actually works. All thought belongs to the Spencers, as it has for 500 years. The Duchy of Cornwall passed to Prince William the moment his father became king, exactly as it has passed for nearly 7 centuries. The Crown estate belongs to no one personally at all, and Diana, Princess of Wales, owns none of it, not because she was denied, but because emotional ownership and legal ownership were never the same thing. The real story was always structural. A centuries-old machine changed hands. The contract was not renewed. A sister stepped quietly out of view, and a grieving public filled every silence with a drama of its own making. So here is the question worth sitting with. Why do we hand ownership to the people we have lost? Why do we need Diana to still hold land, still have a stake, still possess a corner of the kingdom that treated her as an outsider? Perhaps because letting go of a person means letting go of the idea that something of theirs remains, something solid, something we can point to, something the years cannot take. Because sometimes what we inherit from history is not land, but the need to believe it still belongs to someone we remember. If this story moved you, if it made you see the royal family in a new light, take a moment now to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story we uncover on this channel. And tell us in the comments, what is one memory of Diana or one royal mystery that has never quite let you go? Your words might be the very thing that inspires someone else watching to share theirs. Stay with us. The next story is coming soon.